So we've got Lauri Markkanen, who nobody can figure out if he's going to get traded or not. Wendy's doing the meme thing on TV talking about, oh, well, they're saving their cap space. We're going to talk about that. Brandon Ingram still just doesn't have a team. The Nets still have a couple of decent NBA players on the roster, which certainly isn't the plan for the year, seeing as how they signed Killian Hayes. So we got to figure that part out. And some other sneaky good trade candidates around the league, like Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant. We're getting news about these guys as well. So let's talk about it. What is happening with each of these players? Well, Lauri Markkanen, I feel like, is the place that we have to start because his situation is very, very complicated. We all know that if the Jazz got the proper trade offer for Lauri Markkanen, they would trade him. And there have been a couple of teams interested, whether that be San Antonio, whether that be Golden State, a couple of other options, right? And we know that Utah has been active in the trade market in multiple directions this offseason. They apparently were kind of in on Mikal Bridges before the Knicks got him, and they've been in on trying to trade away someone like Lauri Markkanen. Here's the situation with Markkanen. He is extension eligible. He's able to sign an extension with Utah August 6th. The recording of this video today is the 31st, so a week from today, Lauri Markkanen can sign an extension. Right now, he is on a bargain contract where he makes around $20 million a year. And that number is going to go up for this year. And the options that Utah has is they can use the cap space that they have kept to increase his salary for this season, like the Kings did when they renegotiated and extended Domantas Sabonis last offseason, and then sign him to a new, presumably max or close to max extension on August 6th. The reason that that is important is because if Markkanen signs the extension, he can't be traded for 6 months after the extension. So obviously that means that on August 6th and in any days after that, if Markkanen signs the contract, then he's not going to be traded anywhere this offseason, Golden State, San Antonio, or any other team. But the other wrinkle here is if he waits a single day, if he goes to August 7th and then signs the extension, he can't be traded at the deadline either because the trade deadline is 6 months from August 6th. And then obviously if he goes to the 7th, he can't be traded within that 6 month window. Then we'll be past the deadline and it would have to be next off season. So all the reports and all the rumors are basically saying August 6th, August 7th, we're going to find out one way or the other for Lauri Markkanen. And right now, it seems like he is staying put. It seems like he is going to stay in Utah, even though the Jazz probably would like to move him so that they could get better lottery odds. They're not just going to give him away for nothing. Danny Ainge wants to try and get the most out of him that they can. And right now, it seems like he is going to stay. That can always change as things get closer because even though Markkanen wants to stay in Utah, he also doesn't want to lose a ton of games while he's obviously in his prime. And the contract that he would get from Utah, he would get something similar from these other teams as well. So it's not like he would be giving up money to go somewhere else. He would have an extension in place with that new team as well. And that is basically the entire breakdown for Lauri Markkanen. August 6th, extension eligible. If he signs that day, then he can technically be traded before the trade deadline. Or if he signs it August 7th, he can't be traded at all. He goes through the entire year knowing that he's got his money, that he got a raise this year, presumably, and he's going to be in Utah until at least next offseason. It seems like that's the path we're going down there. Another team we're getting a lot of trade rumors about right now is the Portland Trail Blazers. They have two significant pieces here, and it seems like at least one of them, if not both of them, are going to get moved, or they're going to try and move them either the offseason or maybe closer to the deadline. Those two pieces are Anthony Simons and Jeremy Grant. I want to talk about Simons first because I find him to be more interesting because I think he's actually pretty good and going to continue to be good over the next handful of seasons. He's like 25, 26 years old. He is a really good off the dribble three-point shooter, which is a weapon that a lot of teams would love to have. Not great defensively. That's just never going to be a thing for him. He's a skinnier guy. He's a great athlete, but just never going to be someone that you're going to put out there and be excited about the fact that he's playing defense for you. But there are a handful of teams around the league that would like to have a player on the timeline that Anthony Simons is on and would like his skill set. The number one team for me is the Orlando Magic. This has been rumored for a while. Obviously, they brought in KCP in the offseason. They have Jalen Suggs. But if there is a team that sees themselves as like semi-conference finals contenders that needs an infusion of offense in the backcourt, that team is the Orlando Magic. Now, you don't really know how that's going to work alongside Paolo and Franz. Those two guys have the ball a ton. But Simons works really well there as well because he is a lights-out shooter off the ball, moving around off screens. Obviously, I talked about the pull-up three stuff, some kind of screening action with him and Paolo, him and Franz. There's a lot of really cool stuff there, and I don't think it would take a ton for Orlando to get Anthony Simons from Portland. They're trying to open up some backcourt minutes for obviously Shaedon Sharpe, who they got a couple of years ago, Scoot Henderson, who had a weird rookie season. It seems like Anthony Simons is the guy on the outside looking in terms of the future in Portland, and he seems very, very gettable. The other piece for them is Jeremy Grant. Now, this is going to be, I literally put in my notes, it's going to be a desperate team like the Lakers potentially that would go out and get Jeremy Grant. He signed the massive contract last offseason when Portland was still trying to retain Damian Lillard, and they didn't just want to lose Grant for nothing, and then obviously Dame just would have requested a trade. The problem was they signed Grant to a huge 5-year deal, and then the next day Dame requested a trade anyway, and I talked about this at the time. If they could have just said, oh, just kidding, we take back the contract last year, I think they would have done it. It's 5 years. It's not actually a ton per year as the cap continues to go up, but he's in his 30s. He's someone that is not going to improve over the next couple of seasons. Still a good player, can guard and can score, but just not a lot of teams are going to want that contract. So it would be a desperate team like maybe the Clippers if they wanted to add him, maybe the Lakers. Seems like it's pretty likely that either him or Simons are going to get moved either this offseason or names to keep an eye on as we get closer to the deadline. I also want to talk about the Brooklyn Nets because as much as this team clearly wants to be terrible, they signed tank commander Killian Hayes. They're taking flyers on guys like Zaire Williams from the Memphis Grizzlies. Smart moves, by the way, for the Nets to just try and see if they can get any kind of value out of these, second and third chance guys. But when you look at the roster, they actually still have some decent players. Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, any kind of wing that can guard and shoot a little bit is always going to be useful at the deadline or in the offseason. Ben Simmons is also on the team. I wouldn't put him in the category of good NBA player, but he is on the roster. Nick Claxton is someone that once he is able to be traded 6 months from now is going to be a possible trade target at the deadline for teams as well. For Finney-Smith, there's been some rumors in terms of him potentially going to Cleveland as part of a sign and trade for Isaac Okoro, who is still looking for a new contract. That would be another kind of second chance player for the Nets to invest in. Similar to Zaire Williams, although Okoro has had more success so far at the NBA level than Williams has. And Cam Johnson is a perfect, we get to the trade deadline and the Nets get, a protected first or a late first in exchange for Cam Johnson as he goes to, Dallas or Miami or the Lakers or the Clippers or any of these teams. Are like, hey, we need one more guy that can guard and shoot. Every single year, there's one or two of those guys that get moved. And it seems like Cam Johnson is that guy. The weird thing for the Nets is they would probably like to get rid of those guys before the season starts, certainly in Finney-Smith's case, because his value is not going to go up. Like, he's older, he might have a bad start to the year. So you would presume, okay, let's get rid of that guy. Cam Johnson, it seems like maybe they want to hang on to him because his value might go up after a weird first year. And then I think my prediction more so for Simmons is that he probably doesn't play that much this year. Some kind of weird injury thing happens again. And then he either gets dumped at the deadline as a huge expiring contract to help another team out, or he just leaves as a free agent, ends up on like the Warriors or some kind of strange situation like that a year from now in free agency. Next up, let's talk about Brandon Ingram. Now, I did a full video on him in terms of his situation, why the Pelicans are having so many issues finding a team for him. We haven't really gotten any more rumors since then, but I felt like I couldn't make the video without mentioning him. I put out some trade concepts in that video as well, if you want to go back and look at that. It just feels like there's no team out there that sees real value in Brandon Ingram. It feels like the Pelicans are not really that excited about giving him a new contract. And right now, the rumors seem to suggest that he's just going to come back on the one-year deal and then they'll figure it out later. That's obviously dangerous for the Pelicans because he's not a restricted free agent. He could just leave for nothing next year, but they are very hesitant in this new, second apron, all the new salary cap rules. They're very hesitant to give someone like Brandon Ingram, who might not fit with their team, a huge new deal. And it doesn't seem like he's going to sign for anything less than a massive number. And again, they can't seem to find a team for him. So that's another guy to keep an eye on. The last piece here that I'm looking at this offseason, and then as we approach the trade deadline, is the Houston Rockets. This feels like a team that is ready to make some kind of move. I've got a video that I'm working on with them because people seem to be confused about why Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün haven't gotten their new contracts when other guys from their draft class or around their draft class, Franz Wagner, Scotty Barnes, Cade Cunningham, these guys are all getting new extensions, yet Jalen Green and more importantly Şengün haven't. There is a reason for that, and I'm going to do a full video on them. But separate from those guys, or potentially including those guys, this feels like a team that if they get partway through the year and they're either exceeding expectations or below expectations, whatever happens with them, they're primed for a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 trade. Whether it be at the deadline, whether it be next offseason, they have positioned themselves to be not quite what OKC has been over the last couple of years in terms of assets, but something similar to like the New Orleans, Memphis kind of mold of like, we have a lot of really good players. We need to solidify those guys into, for Memphis, and ended up being Marcus Smart. For the Pelicans, it's been either DeJounte Murray or CJ McCollum. They feel like that kind of team, and I'm absolutely keeping an eye on Houston up until the deadline and potentially through the offseason as well. And that's all the NBA trade rumors we've got right now. There's still a ton of stuff going on, but I just kind of wanted to explain exactly what's going on right now.